Welcome to Nancy's Notions Wardrobe Builder. This is the March episode and I'm Joy Mahone. I hope you're enjoying learning along with me as we go through a new apparel item each month. In 2021, we're creating a new wardrobe. Well, in this episode, we are going to be discovering all things pants. Now, some of you may like or hate sewing pants depending on your fitting and sewing experience. I'm gonna take you through a journey where we discover how to fit pants. We're gonna go through the basic pants assembly. The focus of this episode will be all of that along with how to sew a beautiful fly front and a fitted waistband. Well, don't stop there. Make sure you like and subscribe because we're gonna continue our pants sewing journey into the April episode. So you're gonna wanna be notified anytime a new video is available. Well, I'm ready to sew. I hope you are. Let's head over to the cutting table. Notions and supplies featured in this episode include the Sasha trouser pattern or the alternate flint pant. The Sasha trouser pant is a polished wardrobe staple featuring classic tailored details like the flattering mid-rise, tapered leg, and comfortable stretch fit. These are wear everywhere pants that can easily be made in a variety of fabrics for many different looks. Our featured fabric in this video is our Nancy's Notions stretch twill. It is a crosswise stretch, which is the perfect match for the Sasha pattern. Other suggested fabrics would be denim, twill, and even our wardrobe builder stretch scuba. There are a few buttons that are suggested in this pattern, so please read the pattern envelope for those. View A is a cropped pant with no pockets, and view B is a full-length pant with pockets. Other notions are interfacing, long magic pins, a clover chalk roller, a zipper, maybe some tracing paper, Metler Metrazine thread, and a cotton lining for the pocket. Before you cut your pattern pieces out of your favorite fashion fabric, it's imperative that we address the issue of fit, especially when it comes to sewing pants. Now, when it comes to sewing pants, what you need to do is go over to your pattern envelope and select your pant size based on your largest measurement. Cut those pattern pieces out and then join me over on Nancy's Notions 101 tutorial videos where we're gonna address pants fitting. I'm gonna walk you through a few steps for adjusting your pattern and going through the steps for making a muslin fit sample so that we can fit your body and you'll have great success in fitting your pair of pants. I love sewing pants. A pants pattern usually includes the main pant, front, and back piece. Then, based on the style of the pant, you have additional pieces such as a fly, facing, pocket pieces, and a pocket lining to name a few. That might make it sound a little more complicated. So what I want to share with you is a great workflow on how you can organize these pattern pieces and show how you can kind of work in a fluid fashion so that pant sewing can be easy and approachable. Now, generally, pant construction is the same from pattern to pattern, with a few deviations in the order of assembly. But basically, you'll have a center back seam, a center front seam, an inseam, an out seam, whatever you put on the bottom for the hem, and then whatever you do to the top for the waistband. Where the complexity comes in or the different styling is what you do with these elements and things that you add to your pants pattern. And I just recommend that if you've never sewn pants before, keep it simple. You'll want to do the simple dart or pocket-less view in our Sasha pattern. And as you get a little more experience, then you can go in and add more elements and then apply them to other pants patterns as well. Well, the first thing we want to do is manage our pattern pieces. So we're going to separate our pieces into groups so you're not continually sorting through a pile of tissue paper patterns. That actually could be kind of frustrating when you have a bunch of little ones and big ones. So we're just going to sort them. Our pattern features patterns that are labeled cut out of fabric. It also features patterns that are labeled cut out of fabric and interfacing. And yet there are some pattern pieces that are cut out of interfacing only. So I like to divide these into groups, and that is how I actually cut out my pieces of fabric and interfacing and things like the fabric we'll use on the pockets. So the second step is we're gonna go to the main pattern pieces. So put all those little things aside because we're actually gonna start cutting fabric with the larger pieces. Now here I have the back and the front, and then based on how wide your fabric is, you're going to want to reference your pattern guide to see how you want to lay out your fabric. Now, pants are a longer pattern piece, so we're gonna address one at a time. We're gonna start with the pants back. Yours might be laid out just slightly different. But what we are gonna do is make sure that the grain on our pattern, so we have our grain line, is parallel to the grain on our fabric. And I'm gonna be sewing through our wardrobe builder twill, and this has a slight crosswise stretch. So if you were kind of to tug at this, it's a really great stable fabric, yet it's soft and comfortable. Really will be beautiful on any type of pant, in lots of colors. So once you make one pair and you love them, we all know like a perfect fitted pair of pants really is kind of in hot demand. So once you kind of go through this process, you're going to want to make more. I just know it. Okay, well, let's go ahead and cut our pattern piece out. And what I like to do is to cut and mark all in one step. So let's get started. I have a couple pattern weights on here. I'm in my studio, so that's what I typically use on a stable fabric, but we have our magic pins. There are longer pins and then shorter ones, so you can certainly pin your pattern piece down. You're probably going to see that similar to what I did in our February lesson, I'm going to actually just kind of trace out with some chalk the top edge of the pattern, so I don't actually have to pin it, and it really just streamlines the process for being able to cut our pants out. All right, well, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is take my little chalk roller and trace the dart. Now I'm not going to cut that out. I have cut the body of the dart out of the pattern. That makes it really easy for me to use the edge of that as a line for marking. But other than that, I'm just going to kind of roll that right along the top edge. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut straight across that. Put my pattern weight there, pins, whatever you guys use. Okay, well, I have gone around the outer edge, and again, I used my pattern weight, so that process went pretty quick. We're going to remove our excess. When I'm cutting bigger pieces, I don't like those little tags of fabric kind of hanging on there. I like to get that out of my work area. Okay, so we're going to address a couple markings, and we know I've talked about how important really accurate markings are on your pattern. And this is the back of the pant. We have a double notch that is at the center back here, so we want to make sure that is we obviously know it's the center back, but if we happen to put a zipper in the back, if we designed that way, we're going to want to make sure that our zipper is above there, so that's a reference point. There's also a single notch on the side seam, and in pants, that's really important. That's going to help us line up the side seam with the front to the back. Now, because I've traced our dart, what I can do is fold the pattern forward. And I'm actually going to use some tracing paper. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't, but right sides together, so I'm working on the wrong side of the fabric, I can actually put that down, and you can use a ruler. Sometimes I just use the edge of my pattern weight. It's a nice sharp edge, and you can actually use our chalk roller. It will transfer that mark to the other side, or sometimes I'll use my tracing wheel as an alternate. But what I want to really point out here is that there is a marking for the welt pocket. We will not actually be featuring the welt pocket in this lesson. That is coming up in our April wardrobe builder. But if you were marking the welt pocket, now is the time to do that. So you're going to want to find, there we go. I was looking for the line that corresponds to my pattern size, and we're going to mark right across that. And one thing that I like to do is also do a little side stop. So I've got a line and then a little stopper. There we go, so you can see that. And this is powdery tracing paper. It's on the wrong side of the fabric. You can wipe that off with a wet cloth, but this little hash mark here by tracing the side gives me a definitive start and stop, because that's really going to be the accuracy for the pocket. But you'll see that we have the dart marked, and then also those same markings are on the opposite side. Now, before I even move anything, you'll notice I left my weight here, and I haven't, that's allowed everything to stay in place. I am going to pin my darts, and I have 3 different types of pins here. So we're going to use the little applique pins I really like, because I'm going to clip just the very tip of the dart. I can put that applique pin right in the tip of the dart, which stops right where the welt pocket begins. And I just did a little clip at the top of the dart. So now what I can do is, it's still right sides together. I can just pin that. And then I can grab the little applique pin, fold my fabric in half, and I'm actually just gonna leave that applique pin in there so I know right where to stop and or start, depending on what direction, and then that's already marked. I'm going to repeat on the other side before I move anything. Then I'm going to go over and cut out the front of the pattern, and we will then be ready to head over to the sewing machine and sew. But I want to point out that we have excess fabric. And so with these scrap fabrics, what I do is I lay, and this would be, I would say, part 3, is that the smaller pattern pieces, things like our fly and our facing, I'm gonna lay those out on the scrap fabric, cut those pieces out, and any other excess pieces, take them, I'm going to apply some interfacing, do any additional pinning, and then I am ready to sew our pants together. After you've cut out your pattern front, you'll notice that there is a fly extension. It's important to note that accurate measurements on the fly for where the fold and the seam line are really important. So use a really fine chalk roller to determine where that stitching line is, so that you'll have ease and success when you're creating the fly front. All right, we're at our sewing machine ready to do our basic assembly. My machine is set up with a brand new size 12 needle and matching Metrozine thread. I will be using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance unless otherwise stated. Well, we can knock out quite a few steps here because we have everything pinned and marked from coming from our cutting table. Well, let's get started. We're going to stitch the back darts. If you remember, I have a tiny little applique pin right at the base of the dart. We've seen this before. You can start at the tip and work your way out, or start on the outside and work your way in. This is a pretty moderate or stable fabric, so it's not very delicate. It's not couture, so you absolutely can backstitch at the base of your dart. It's not going to hurt anything, and it's not going to show. Matter of fact, with this type of fabric and this type of pattern, I would probably suggest doing that for durability. All right. Forward, backwards, and we'll just go right up to the tip of the dart. Beautiful. Remove that, clip my thread, and then we're going to just flip this over and do the same thing on the other side. So you can see. All right. of our those little applique pins really are helpful. Okay, so we have those darts done. I will take that to my iron and press those toward the center back. But now we are going to stitch the center back crotch seam and 5/8 of an inch. So we'll get that lined up. All right. Now, I love that our pattern instructions give you the suggestion of reinforcing this seam. If you do not have a serger, I would highly recommend doing that. I know way back in my years of tailoring, working in the tailor shop, that is one thing where there would be a double row of stitching on the seat of men's pants. It just allows for, again, increased durability. So run back over that row of stitching. Quite often we will flip the garment over and then do that from the other side. But you can again put a serger on there or just run an additional row of stitching for a reinforced center back. Well, the next step in our pattern is to attach the welt pocket on the center back. This is a feature of our April wardrobe builder lesson. So for this project today, if you want to include that, follow the steps in your pattern. Otherwise, join me in April wardrobe builder and we will be delving into the welt pocket in a in-depth 101 video. The next step in our Sasha pant is to create the side pockets. We're going to take the side pocket facing pieces and make sure you pay real close attention in your pattern guide, but we will be finishing off the inner edge of this particular piece. So you can turn it under and top stitch it, you can zigzag, or in my case I put a serge on there. Now once those are finished off, we are going to take the pocket lining pieces. There's a top and bottom lining, and I encourage you, have some fun. The lining is going to be on the inside, so you can use one of your favorite printed fabrics. Mine has little pattern pieces on it, or you can use your fashion fabric or a flesh tone color fabric so that it kind of blends in with your skin tone. The sky's the limit, so be creative. But what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that, and follow your pattern guide, but you want to make sure that you line up the correct facing piece and the correct edge with the pocket lining. And it's really pretty easy because the edges match the outer edge. Now, I just want to share a quick little tip. I'm going to use my Sulky spray adhesive. And what that allows me to do is put a temporary adhesive on here. If you're worried about things sliding around when you're sewing, although this fabric is really pretty stable, you can use some spray adhesive to hold that down, and then you don't even need to pin, which is kind of nice. So we're going to do that on all 4 pieces, and then what we're going to do is about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, we are going to stitch around the entire perimeter of this pocket to hold that together. So let's get those stitched together. All right, well, we have all 4 pieces stitched around. The next thing we want to do is we want to take one of each piece, so a top and a bottom. You'll see that they're each different, and we're going to lay them right sides together. And we are going to stitch across the lower edge. Use that 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. The lower edge and lower edge only. Now you'll notice I didn't actually even put any pins on there. That's a really stable fabric, and so as you get comfortable in your sewing, try it. I think sometimes sewers are hesitant to eliminate pins. Go at your own comfort level. It's just really a comfort level, really, and what certain things will and won't do. But we have that stitched. The next thing we can do is we can go put an edge finish on that, and then we are going to attach the pockets to the front of the pant. Now at this point, the pocket is only stitched together at the bottom edge. We're ready to attach the pocket bag to the pant front. Now I want to point out that you want to make sure you're attaching it to the right edge. So reference your pattern, but we also have visual cues. The angle is the side seam, and this funny looking shape right here is where we are going to put the fly of the zipper. So I do have students that message me and tell me that they have attached things to the wrong edges of their pattern. So it does happen. But we also can match. And really in sewing, if the edges for some reason don't correspond correctly, it's probably a good cue that you might have the wrong edge of the piece. But let's look here. We've just created this pocket bag, and we know that this is the edge that we're going to match. So we're going to open this up. All right, and I want you to ignore everything else on the pattern. We're just simply going to line up this angled edge from this point to this point. We're not going to sew all the way down. That will be a mistake. So you want to just stitch this angled edge only. And it lays and nests beautifully right sides together. Lay that down nice and flat. And honestly, this is very stable. I'm not even going to put pins in there, but if you need a couple pins, and based on your fabric, if you have something a little slinky or that's going to shift, definitely put some pins there. But in this instance, we won't need it. All right, we're gonna stitch all the way down to that point, but again, remember, we're not going just down that entire side. There's a great illustration in your pattern guide. The next thing we want to do is open this up, and we are going to do understitching, which we have encountered in our hoodie. We've understitched a lining or facing in our Betty dress. Well, now we are going to understitch our pockets. Now, I'm going to set this one aside because I have one that is already pressed. But what you want to do here is take your seam allowance that you just stitched and press it toward the inside or toward the facing. So I've already pressed this one. Now what I want to do is understitch, and I'm going to do the understitching on this facing piece. And I'm going to do it about an 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the fold. That understitching is meant to be seen on the inside only. So when I fold this, there's a nice, beautiful edge right here. So let's run that through. And when I'm understitching quite a lot, I just use the lines that are on my presser foot. Probably most of you do too. And because that's going to be in the seam allowance, I'm not even going to back stitch down there. But a beautiful, we'll hold that here for a moment. You can see beautiful, nice, even understitching. We can now flip this pocket to the inside. Now is the time, if you want to do some sort of top stitching or decorative edge, you can do that along this edge. In further lessons, we're going to talk about jeans, and you'll see a lot of top stitching. So sometimes throughout the process of putting your garment together, you'll add top stitching at random times. Now, I want to point out that once we turn this to the inside, give this a really good press. And on the wrong side of everything, just lay out the pocket. You can use a little bit of that temporary spray adhesive if you want, but again, most of these fabrics are stable, so I'm going to make sure that lays nice and flat. I'm going to fold this pocket over, make sure that lays nice and flat. I'm going to line up the top edge of the pant and down here as well, and let's flip that over. The next thing we want to do is we want to top stitch across the top and down the side to anchor our pocket in place. time for the star of the show. We are going to tackle this fly front opening. Now, that can be a challenge for some people, but hopefully we can present it in a very approachable fashion. I always try to use and look for anything that's going to make the directions a little more clear in sewing. And so I want to point out that the first thing that I would suggest is make sure that your edges of the fly are trimmed precise. You'll see that I have a scant amount of my lining where probably just a little bit of a miscut on my end sticking out. So I'm going to trim that off. That way our eyes just are not drawn to it. Now, our pattern instructions are creating a pant that has an opposite fly opening than probably what you're used to seeing. And that's because historically, men and women had different left and right openings on their pants. So this is done in a true ladies fashion. So the opening will be on the wearer or when you have it on your body, the right side. So what we want to do, what I like to do is put a little safety pin on the side of the pant that the fly opening is going to be on. It just kind of helps me remember which is which, because it's very easy in this process to sew things on the wrong side, and that's going to determine whether your fly turns out or not. So for the ladies pant, and I believe our pattern references that anytime the pattern references left or right, it would be if you are wearing it. So if it references right, that would be your right side if you're wearing it, which is the reason I have both pieces laying here, so I can kind of look at it. It makes sense that the pockets are right here. Okay, well, what we want to do is we are going to lay right sides together on this fly. And let's talk about a couple markings here to ensure that this lines up. Making sure that this really has a nice edge to it is going to be a big friend of yours. So make sure that these edges line up, and as I mentioned, trim down the side. Now, we have a little intersection here, or a little dot, and I'm a big fan of really marking these things precise. So use your little chalk roller. Mark that. If you need to put a pin there, this is a great location for one of our little applique pins, or just another pin. That's going to be a good visual cue when we go to sew. If you want to trace out a 5/8 of an inch stitching line, great place to do that. The next thing is you have a notch up here on your pattern, and our stitching is going to be straight up from that dot. So if we want to trace this out, and actually I forgot that I have a blue chalk roller, so you'll be able to see that blue line is going to be a temporary basting line. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to start at the top, and we're not going to back stitch. We are going to lengthen our stitch a little bit to a basting. I'm using a 3.5 millimeter, but it just needs to be longer than a really tiny stitch because we're going to take these out. But we're going to stitch all the way down to that dot, and then when we get to that dot, we're going to reduce our stitch length to our normal 2.5 millimeter, and I'm going to back stitch. And then what I'm going to do is when I back stitch here is I'm going to follow that down to the end. Once I do that, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to clip to, but not through, the stitching line at that dot. All right, so I think we can do that. We've got elongated stitch there. We're going to baste. I'm to my dot, almost, one more stitch. All right, I'm gonna lower the length. I'm gonna pull my pin out. And then here, this is one of these areas where the back stitching and the smaller stitch in that crotch curve is really important for durability. All right, now, You're going to hear me say durability probably a lot as we talk about pants, but they're one of those functional things. They're around the lower body as we move and sit, and you have a spread to your body mass. You want to make sure these things stay together. We want to reinforce this lower curve. So you have a couple options. I'm going to go ahead and clip to, but not through. All right, so there we did it. No going back. And now we want to put a little edge finish on just this little section. And by clipping that, that allows us to contour to that edge. All right, so we can put an additional row of stitching, or if we want to serge that, we can. I almost forgot to mention that we can do a little edge finish on the right side of our fly, and only the right side. And if you're not sure, go back to where your pin is at, and you can do that now. Turn that under, or we can run that through a serger. Your instructions will have you do it before you stitch this, but sometimes that's hard to see in an instruction, so I wanted to sew this first. But I would recommend, if you do an edge finish, do that before you stitch this seam together. All right, well, we're going to put those finishes on there and press this open and move on to the zipper application. Our center front of our pant is now basted together above our dot. This is the right side. So if you can envision this having a fly front opening in a few moments. We're going to flip this back over. As I mentioned in our previous step, we've pressed this open. Now I want to take a moment to really point out the difference. So I'm going to draw a L. This is the left, and this is the right. I'm doing that upside down. Okay, if you need to mark these or put some sort of reference on here, it's a great thing to do, because if you've never sewn a fly before and you read the instructions, you might pull your hair out because there is a distinctive left and right, and it feels a little awkward. Okay, so, and remember as well that the right side is the one that we finished off, and we do have our safety pin here. So that's our visual cue. Okay, we have our zipper, and it's okay if your zipper is much longer than your opening. What we want to do is make sure that when we line this up, the zipper stop is about 3/4 of an inch above where that dot, or where that opening is. I don't want to say opening, but where we clipped. So I know this is blue on blue, so that makes it a little bit of a challenge, but you can see this flap right here. Okay, and actually, let's just do this. I'm going to put a little X right here. There, and you can kind of see that's where that dot is. Okay, we're going to take our zipper and we're going to lay it right sides together. So if you were unzipping this zipper, this is the correct side. So zip it up and then flip it over, and you're going to be laying your zipper on top. Now, the trick to this is, what you want to do is you have a zipper tape, and then these are the teeth, okay? So this zipper tape, we want to line up on the stitching. So we're going to line that up. So these teeth are just to that side of the stitching. Now the zipper stop, we want to be about 3/4 of an inch above that mark we just put there, or above the dot. And that'll be important because when you go to top stitch this, you don't want to be stitching over top of the zipper pull. And this is not a place where you want your zipper to be much longer, because it'll go into the crotch area and it just is awkward. Okay, so if we line these up, and we can take a little peek by lifting this up. The teeth of the zipper should be about 1/2 of an inch to the left side of the fold, okay? So again, we're gonna line up the zipper tape with the basted seam line. The teeth are gonna be just to the left side. Now the next thing we want to do is we are going to pin this left side. But when we pin this, we want to make sure that we are only catching the zipper to the fly facing. And it's a short area, so I'm only going to put 2 pins in there. But if I flip that over, notice that I didn't pin it all the way through. It is just, it's freestanding, it's pinned to this area. Now I've got a zipper foot in here, so I'm going to put this under the machine, and I can double check and make sure that my teeth, if you bend the tape over, you can see that the teeth are about 1/2 of an inch. Another extra thing that you could do is if you wanted to go onto your pattern and pencil in a line 1/2 of an inch to the left of the stitching, the basting there, you could line the teeth up with that reference line as well. So another tool. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and stitch, making sure that we're not catching the teeth. So we're about 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the zipper. All right. And grab my scissors here. I'm going to clip my thread off. So now we can see that the zipper is attached. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to flip that seam allowance to the inside, and we are going to top stitch down the understitch basically, or top stitch, kind of the same thing here. We're going to do that. I do need to switch positions on my zipper foot. There we go, and I'm going to try to get a little closer to the edge, so about 1/8 of an inch. And we're going to clip that thread. Pause there for a moment so you can see what that looks like. And then we're ready to move on to the next step. All right, we're halfway there with the zipper. We have just top stitched, and if we lay this back down as originally placed there, the next thing we want to do is we want to fold the fly as if it's going to lay on top of the right facing. So here's the right facing. Now when you go to lay this on top, you're not going to be able to hide the zipper. That's not what we're doing, okay? So what we're doing is we're basically slowly moving this facing piece over on top as far as we can go, which is about halfway. We've got this little fly extension we just top stitched, so we'll lay that nice and flat. Don't worry about this edge that's over on the left. What we're doing now is we are going to actually do the same thing. We're going to stitch the zipper tape on the right side. So I'm going to kind of pinch that together and put a pin through there because we want to stitch along the zipper tape, but we only want to catch the fly extension. All right, so if I move this open, you'll be able to see that we're going to stitch down that side. I'm not catching anything else. It's a little awkward. This is one of those that if you want to practice on a little piece of fabric first, it's a great, great little thing to practice it. Once you do it, it makes complete sense. But the first time through, figuring out your left and right's a little tricky. Okay, so I'm going to lay this on here. I have my zipper foot on. Again, I am not stitching through anything else except the facing. I'm going to back stitch. Clip my little thread. All right, so this is attached. We're going to flip this over to the right side of the fabric now. And it lays nice and flat. So we know that our zipper is under here somewhere. We can't see it yet. And what you want to do though is you want to feel for that zipper stop. All right, and mine is, I'm going to actually grab a little different chalk marker. I'm going to put a little dot of chalk where the zipper stop is because you do not want to sew over that. Next thing you want to do is there is a fly top stitching guide. Okay, so you can lay that on your fabric, line up the center front, and then you can take a removable chalk tool and actually trace that. And it will catch the zipper tape that's under there, or the zipper fly. So, and you can kind of pull that under there and double check. Mine's just a scant amount to the inside of where the template is, so I'm just gonna retrace, and that's fine. There'll be some subtle variations based on your sewing machine. The settings are slightly different. And whether you're really generous or not. So I've got a couple lines here. I'm gonna use the inner line, and I still have my zipper foot on here, so I actually can start from the bottom and work my way up. And if you wanna put 1 or 2 pins in there just to hold it in place, you can baste that by hand or with machine just to make sure that you have everything caught, but I feel pretty confident there. Double checking that I'm not gonna hit that zipper stop. This is a place in jean construction where often you see real heavy back stitching, so you certainly can do a bar tack there. But at minimum, you do want to back stitch, and I do it a couple times. I just don't want that stitching to come undone. And I'm going a little slow because I want a really precise curve. Looks good. Pull my pin out. All right, so we've got, I'm gonna steam off some of the markings that are on here, so we'll steam that off, but we know that our zipper's under here. We've got a fly extension. It is now adhered to the back. It's what I just top stitched caught this edge of the facing, so you'll notice I can't move that because it's all anchored and attached. The next thing is we're going to put that fly extension on there and finish up our fly front zipper. I'm going to introduce the fly extension piece. You will be cutting 2 of them. One of them, and it doesn't matter which one, you're going to interface. Then you're going to put them right sides together. You're going to sew around the long curved edge, 5/8 inch. And then I've gone ahead and serged mine. You don't have to do that, but you certainly want to clip the seam allowance, and then you're going to also put a couple clips in the curve. The next thing we want to do is turn this right side out. Put a really good press on this. I'll take that over to my iron. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch around here, and we'll be able to affix that to the left fly opening. Okay, this is the last step for our fly. Are you hanging in there? All right, well, we have our fly extension. We've top stitched. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna attach this to that left fly, and this will start to look like your pants. If you, jeans or things like this will have a fly extension. It protects your body from the abrasion of the zipper teeth. It's just a great way to also protect the integrity of the zipper opening for longevity and durability as well. Okay, so remember we have a left and a right. If you can't remember, you have your safety pin on the right side, but if you need to check, just reference your pants or flip them over and you'll know that this is the right side and this is the left of the wearer or on your body. We are going to line up the long edge of the facing. Now I have actually already gone in and put a serge stitch on here. There are, based on the fabrics that I'm using, I have a couple different applications that your pattern instruction won't tell you. So I like to go ahead and just put an edge finish on that before I even attach it. What's gonna happen is you're gonna attach this edge to the zipper tape, and then we're gonna trim off this excess. But you have, again, a couple options. The zipper facing will hang a little bit lower than the edge right here. So that is okay. You don't want it all the way down into the crotch area. So based on how you have fitted your pants, you might need to raise it or lower it. You want to make sure that this contoured area covers the top stitching on the front, because you'll go back and you'll put that final official bar tack here, and that's going to hold it. And it can be either right on the edge or just slightly above. I kind of like just slightly above. I'm missing the seam allowance, and then that gives me a little bit of overlap for where the seam attaches. But I want to point out one thing you can do is you can also do a surge or a zigzag on this edge. And then when you lay this on here, instead of trimming that off, you can actually roll that forward. It's kind of a nice finish, or if you put some bias binding on there, like if I'm doing silk pants or things like that, you are adding weight to the zipper, so you want to make sure that it's not really thick. So on this pair of pant, because it's a twill, I'm not going to do that. But if you're doing like crepe or things like that, very delicate pants, then I do that because it's an additional layer of durability. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and pin this on here. Get our pins, and you can stitch it first and then trim, or you can trim and then stitch, whichever you really prefer. What I am going to do is stitch about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Then that is going to allow me the ability to kind of roll back the edge, trim that off, and then what I like to do is kind of go in and just kind of baste that down to the lining of the pant. But let's put this under here, and we are also still rolling everything out of the way so that we're only catching that overlap. And it's a little thick at this point, so we definitely want to make sure we're using our zipper foot. And again, I'm just about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Beautiful. All right. So here you'll see what we have attached. So this is still freestanding. Clip this off, and I've got my real fine scissors, so now I can go in and trim this little bit. And this is what I was talking about. I mean, see how it's a very nice finish edge, but it is kind of nice if you can go in and catch that. Just holds it in place and it hides that, but it's a pretty durable area, so that's hidden. You can put a bias binding around there as well, just, you know, for another element of professionalism. Well, we'll flip this over and we'll go in and we're gonna just do one more reinforced bar tack. I have a size 12 needle in my machine. If this gets really thick, you're gonna wanna bump up to a 14, or if you're in denim, put a denim needle on there. But I have a brand new sharp needle in here, so it's pretty good. That looks great. Hold that up there for the bar tack. Now here's my little dot. I'm gonna erase that so that won't be on there, but we've got the little bar tack on there. The next thing is I'm gonna find a seam ripper, and then I'm gonna pull out those basting threads, and we are going to have a working fly zipper. Just remove those basting threads and voila, you have tackled and finished a beautiful fly front zipper. The next step is to sew the inseam and the outseam of your pants. Place your pants right sides together and pin the inseam. I recommend placing a vertical pin in the intersection where the front crotch and the back crotch meet, and then go ahead and pin all the way up your pant leg. You will notice that one side is slightly longer than the other, and this is intentional. So what I like to do is line up the hem of the pants and then pin up my leg about halfway, and then what I'm going to do is just pull, provide a little bit of tension, That's gonna help ease that back piece, which is slightly longer than the front, and place a few pins there to distribute that little bit of fullness. There should be no gathers. It'll be nice and flat. There's just a little bit of easing into the pant leg. Well, let's go ahead and stitch up one leg and down the other. Okay, we are going to go ahead now and pin the side seams together. I like to start at the top and work my way down, making sure that everything is laying nice and flat in the area where the pocket bag is hanging. I oftentimes will do horizontal pins going toward the garment instead of parallel to the side seam. It just helps me to ensure that those pocket bag pieces are laying nice and flat. Well, let's stitch from the top to the bottom. Then we're gonna go ahead and flip the pant over, stitch the other side seam, and you will have created the overall shape of the pant. All right, let's talk belt loops. Your pattern provides one pattern piece as a belt loop guide, and what I like to do is actually cut this near the selvage edge of the fabric. Now your belt loop rectangle has you fold it in half once and then again to create the narrow belt loop. I like cutting near the selvage because when I fold the first edge, it is then covered by that tightly woven selvage edge, and it provides for a nice finish on the outside of the garment. It reduces bulk because I don't have to serge or top stitch, and it's also not going to fray. So you'll see how nice the belt loop looks here with that selvage edge on the top. We're then going to cut our belt loop strip into 4 parts that we are then going to place on the pant in the corresponding marks on your pattern piece. We are ready to learn how to create a beautiful contoured and fitted waistband. There are a few steps, but it's really very simple. So let's head over to the cutting table and get started. We are ready to prepare our 2 waistband pieces for assembly. You are going to have one waistband piece that does not have interfacing, and then you're going to take the second piece and have interfacing. Your first piece, you want to make sure that you put some sort of edge finish on the outer, larger arced edge, and that can be a row of serging or it can be turned under and stitched. The second piece does have interfacing placed on it to stabilize, and then what you're going to do is you're going to place them right sides together, and you are going to line up that inner gradual arc of the waistband. Make sure that you are lining up the correct edge. So you are not stitching on the edge that has the finish, but you are stitching on that inner kind of gradual arc. You're placing them right sides together. You will be able to stitch 5/8 inch clip, and then you'll be ready to attach to your waistband. Well, let's take a look at our waistband. We have taken it to our sewing machine, and as I just illustrated, we stitched right sides together. And I first want to point out, isn't this blue just very bold? I think you can probably see that. Just it has such a rich color. I love that. Just very true to color. So I'm going to be really happy with these pants once they're done. All right, well, I want to show you what the inside of this looks like. So we have stitched right sides together, and I actually decided I didn't need to clip the inside of my waistband. I stitched at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and there's such a curve there and it's on the bias. So I didn't really need to do that. What I did was I pressed it and I just made sure that it would lay nice and flat, which you can see. You'll also notice this isn't just a straight rectangle waistband like you're gonna find on a lot of really quick to sew pants. The contour of this really allows for a beautiful fit around the contour of our waistbands and our waist, which a lot of us, we don't have just a straight line as a waist. So this is gonna fit really well. Okay, so we did understitching and you'll see there's an additional row of stitching. Let's flip this over and I'm gonna hold this here. And because I used matching threads, you may or may not be able to see that real crisp. But there is a row of understitching on there and it just looks beautiful. That is on the inside or the wrong side of the waistband. And I just think it's kind of good to go through what this looks like before it's attached to the actual pant so that you're not putting it on the wrong side together. All right, so this is what's going to be next to your body, that understitching and then that finished off edge. And also when we go to stitch the waistband down on the garment, we can top stitch it, which is going to catch that and it's going to lay nice and flat. This is the edge that you're going to see on the outside of your body. Nice, again, beautiful folded edge. It's interfaced and then it has its own kind of self-facing because we have this mirror image of the waistband. So it's just going to have a real beautiful edge, and this wardrobe builder twill presses and tailors beautifully. You can top stitch and add decorative elements to this. If you wanted some sort of embroidery or something, now might be the time to do that. You can open this up nice and flat, do your decorative element on the waistband. Make sure you're doing it above the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance because we will be stitching this to the band and then you're going to lose a little bit of that. But again, now is a great time to do some sort of decorative stitching while you can open it up and do that to the flat layer. All right, well, those are the areas and components of our waistband. Let's grab our pants, attach this, and we're almost done. All right, we are plugging along on our waistband. I actually think waistbands are really pretty easy. Some patterns present them with many steps. I kind of have my own approach to how I do that. So I'm gonna deviate from the pattern instructions here and you're gonna get the same results. But what I like to do is once I have my waistband done, what I like to do is fold it in half. And then on the fold, so if we fold this in half here, then I'm gonna either put a pin or a chalk mark, and just so you guys can kind of see it, I'm gonna put a little bit longer chalk mark on there. This will dissolve. But what this is I'm gonna line that up with the center back of my pants. So if we kind of look at this from this angle, this is the center back on the inside. And then here you'll see our center back darts that are on there. And of course, if we fold this forward, you'll see the front pocket bag. We've got that fly extension and then our zipper, which is too long. We will shorten that. I've just left it at this point because there is nothing like shortening a zipper and then cutting it off and accidentally pulling the zipper pull off. But before we attach the waistband, we're gonna have a little fun. Okay, so let's take a look at these belt loops. So I have the belt loops pinned on here and there is a little optical illusion. So you have a choice to make. I've been sewing long enough that sewers ask a lot of questions and you hear a lot of, well, I do it this way and I do it that way. So this is where you really get to do this however you want. Now, the optical illusion is, are these belt loops centered and in the correct location? Well, I worked in men's tailoring for many years and we had a little bit different approach to where we would put belt loops and how many, but Often what happens with the fly overlap is that there is an optical illusion. And what happens is it looks like, because of the top stitching, that we have one belt loop that is much closer to the front than the other side. So I'll tell you what I did here in a moment, but you have a couple options. You can measure from the center front to either the inside or the outside or the inside edge of the belt loop. It doesn't matter. Let's just say we measured from here over, and then we took that same measurement and we started in the same spot and measured from here over. We can place the belt loops that way. If I were to open up our fly extension, you'll notice that the edge of this fabric is actually hidden on the inside of the fly. So the other option would be from the edge of your fabric, measure over, and then from the edge of this fabric, measure over. And if you do that, you are going to have a slightly different placement of your belt loops. So what I recommend is really, you have, again, that optical illusion. You want to place the belt loops where they're going to look aesthetically pleasing on your body shape and size. But also what I tend to do is start at the side seam and measure inward, and that's how I mark it. That way I'm not hung up on how it looks. But if you have maybe a really wide waistband, or you're absolutely planning on tucking in a shirt, then what you might err on is making them look like they're even if one happens to be just to the inside or outside of a placement line. There's sometimes that visual cue can be a little more important than the actual measurement. And so that's one of those kind of fun little nitpicky things that you really have options based on how you're going to wear it, how it's going to look, maybe even the color, the width of the belt loop, that sort of thing. But what I did on our pants was I just measured from the side seams in. I checked the width here. It looked fine. It measured fine, but there is a little bit of an optical illusion. So that's kind of a fun little thing to point out. All right, well, let's go ahead, and I think what I want to do is flip our pants over. And you'll get to see not so much of a big deal on the back, because we have the center back seam and of course the belt loops I lined up with the darts. And you can add more. If you have a larger size pant, you can certainly add more waist belt loops. One thing that we always watched for in men's tailoring was that we avoided belt loops too close to the center back seam. What can happen is sometimes you have a pocket bag here, and so if you're going to ever do some altering or tailoring of your pants, let's say, for example, you know that your weight goes up and your weight goes down. If that's the case, then you can make your pants, you can add additional seam allowance in the back of the pant so that you can let it out or you can take it in. If the belt loops are too close and you want to take them in, what you want to avoid are belt loops that look like they're right on top of each other, because that's kind of silly looking. So in that case, you would remove them or place them outwards. So just a fun little extra lesson that's not in your pattern envelope, but just a fun little thing to talk about. All right, well, let's go ahead. We're going to line up that mark on our waistband to the center back. We're going to put some pins on this. And this is a contoured waistband, so it's not going to just lay, you can't just lay it flat like that and pin it. So you are going to have to pick your pants up and physically walk and kind of curve the waistband as we're going. All right, we will continue our zipper to the center front. We want to unzip our zipper at this point so that we have the separated left and right sides. Now here we have our fly extension. Our waistband will, there's plenty of length there. So what's going to happen is this is going to go beyond, if I kind of flip that over, you'll see that this is going to go beyond this edge here. And depending on how you place your fly extension on here, mine ended up going just a little bit above the top edge of the pant, which is fine. There's nothing wrong. We're going to trim that off anyways. Visually, if it helps you, you can do that now. And actually we can shorten the zipper now as well. And what I did was I just cut right across the top. I cut in between the teeth so I didn't hurt my scissors or anything. And that raw edge of the zipper is gonna be encased anyways. So we're gonna keep pinning this. And this will go right to the edge. Now I'm going to go to my sewing machine. I'm going to pin all the way around to the other side. At this point, I'm not going to worry about any overlap of the waistband just yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and stitch all the way around the waistband, and then we can trim that a little bit. We're going to go ahead and press the seam, and then we'll finish that off. But this is how you're going to want to pin your waistband, attach it, and then we'll have a little finishing, a hem, and we are done with our trouser pant. We're getting so close. All right, well, I have gone to my iron and I pressed the seam allowance toward or upwards, okay? So we've clipped that. Here's what it looks like on the inside. It's pressed upwards so that it's going to be sandwiched between the waistband once I fold that top facing down. Looks beautiful. And camera never does this kind of fabric justice. So when you're sewing your own trouser pants, you're really going to enjoy the finish of this particular pant. It has a little bit of a sheen to it. It's a real tight weave. And so you'll kind of see that it looks almost satiny, not quite, but it's a great, great fabric. And just as we get these pants done, it looks so pretty. Okay, well, let's finish off this edge of the trouser pant, and you'll notice that we have the fly facing. Now, when we go to do this next step, we do not want to stitch or catch any of this folded edge in the fly facing. So we're gonna fold the the waistband in half, okay? But what I want to point out and what's really important is we have understitching that is on the facing side of the waistband. So when you go to fold this, it is important that you fold on the actual seam allowance. If you go to the inside of the pant, you might see one row of stitching and think you've done it correctly, but make sure you fold that on the actual seam line and not the understitching, because otherwise it's not going to lay correctly when you turn it right side out. Okay, so we folded that in half. Let's kind of flip this over so you can see one side is longer than the other. That is normal. And this is the edge that we have that beautiful edge finish on. I want to point out that you can do, and you've probably seen some pants that have a beautiful like bias binding. Now's the time where you can certainly add that edge to that if you haven't done anything to this upper edge. Okay, well, let's fold this, and I am actually going to grab a piece of chalk and just kind of mark here what we're stitching so you can see that a little better. All right, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to stitch a straight line, catching everything in the waistband. But before we do that, we want to take this little edge and we want to fold it at an angle. All right, and now let's grab a couple pins here. This will allow it to lay nice once we turn it inside out. Okay, so back to our chalk here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch just to the outside of the facing. Remember, you're not stitching this to this facing. That needs to be free. So let's get that under the machine. And if you want to baste this, if you've never done this before or you're rusty on your skills, baste. Do it, which is a larger or a longer stitch length. And then that way, matter of fact, I'll do that here. I'm not going to back stitch. I'm just going to stitch that together. Because what I can do, now we are going to want to clip this, but don't clip that yet. Then I can flip this kind of, to the inside out. And our basting, again, it's kind of a temporary, so it's not going to hold real snug. But as we flip that inside out, it'll give you an idea of what to expect. Now, we will clip and poke the corner so that we have a nice corner there. But as we look at this on the inside, what will happen is that will be a mitered corner. All right, and then you'll be able to top stitch this down. And depending on how, if you've removed any excess length here when you did the facing, there might be more of an angled mitered corner rather than just a straight angle, which is sufficient. So let's flip this back over. And now we're going to stitch it for real this time. So let's do a little smaller stitch length, forward and backwards. All right. So now what we want to do is we're going to clip away most of that excess and clip our threads. That is probably my sewing pet peeve, so we want to make sure. And then you can also clip at an angle right there. Now we'll be able to turn this to the inside, and I'm going to close my scissors, but I'm going to stick them in here and just kind of run them along the seam line. I know there's different tools and gadgets for that as well, so whatever you use. And this is, it's a twill fabric, so it has a little more body to it than like a quilting cotton. So it's okay to, I'm putting some pressure on here, really getting that corner. There are different things you can sew little loops in there to turn it, but really, let's hold that up here, minus the little thread sticking out there from my basting. But let's look at that, and you'll see that that makes, and I haven't even pressed that yet, but that has a really nice corner to it. And there's one more little thread, so that's usually an area where you're going to have a little thread creep up. So on the outside of the garment, you'll see that that's going to be a nice, beautiful edge. So the last thing we want to do is repeat this on the other side, and then we're going to be able to pin our waistband. If you feel like you need to put a pin there, I usually just kind of anchor it in the waistband like this, and I'll do some pins all the way around there. What that does, let's flip it back around again, is it holds it nice and flat, and then we're going to go from the top side and we're going to stitch in the ditch. And what that's going to do is it's going to catch this edge right here. You can go in by hand and catch that. The great thing is you have all this pocket bag facing here, so if you do stitch that by hand, you'll see how nice and flat that lays because it's a contoured waistband, but you can go in and catch that in there. But again, this is a twill fabric, and so if we stitch in the ditch, what we'll be able to do is line our needle up right in the seam allowance there and stitch all the way across there. All right, well, let's finish these up. Well, we're probably going to want to run and put a nice press on this waistband, but let's finish off our belt loops. We have the waistband is all top stitched down, and of course you can go, or it's a stitch in the ditch down, I should say, but if you wanted to go in and do a fun top stitch around here, now is a great time to do that in a contrasting thread, especially if you get into denim and things like that. All right, well, let's talk about our belt loop. Okay, so on a belt, you're gonna plan the width of your belt based on the width of your waistband. That's a great guide. If you had a really chubby waistband or something that was much taller, then you could incorporate a bigger belt. And of course you can kind of adjust that to your preferences. One thing that you wanna do though is that you'll notice, I'm gonna draw a line right here. This is where the waistband attaches to the pant. That is not where we're gonna fold the belt loop, all right? You need some sort of give in the belt loop, and about 1/2 of an inch, 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch is actually where, if I put my chalk here, that's where we are gonna stitch. And you're not gonna stitch the full length of where I have the chalk here. You're only gonna stitch and back stitch on the belt loop, but see how that's a distance from here. So if I stitch that, then what happens is when I fold the belt loop over, there's some give. And so as we run the belt loop through there, we have just a little more space on that. So that's the first thing we're gonna do. And again, it's been fun for me to share a few of my tailoring stories and experiences from men's tailoring. I have done a lot of belt loop assembly, removal, reattachment in men's tailoring of trouser pants. For some fine suit stores. And I think a lot of those fine tailoring things definitely translate over to ladies' clothing as well. Okay, so you'll see that I stitched that down. It is anchored below that. It also helps the integrity of the waistband so that that's not pulling from the pant if there's some sort of tension with your waistband in there. Okay, well, let's wrap this up. The next thing is we're gonna fold the top edge of the belt loop under. So the belt loop is gonna be initially much longer than your waistband. Now, if you alter the size of the waistband, make your belt loops significantly longer to accommodate that as well. But what we don't want to do is just run up here and stitch over top. We also want to fold this end under, and we're going to line the folded edge of the belt loop up with the top folded edge of the pants. And the same thing applies. Now what we're gonna do here is we are gonna stitch right across the top of the belt loop, but what I like to do is just cinch it down just a scant amount, and then that way I can just put a little bit more of a roll up here on the pant. So basically I line up the edge and then I scooch it down just a little, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, and then I kind of roll the belt loop up. It just gives me a little bit more excess space in there. Now you can put some pins there. You can use some temporary spray adhesive if you need to do that. I just kind of, once you can press it first, and really once you have the belt loop shaped, you really don't need pins, but use what you need. The other thing that you can do is you certainly can weave a pin in from either side so that it kind of holds it in that way. But once it's folded, and see how it's already kind of holding its shape because I've kind of pressed it with some pressure and the warmth of my hands. I have a size 12 needle in here. If you get into much heavier fabrics, you're definitely going to want to bump that up to a 14 or even a 16 if you're doing denim. But we're gonna go back and forth, and I would highly recommend when you're doing this, stitch right here to go off of the belt loop onto the pant, 1 or 2 stitches. If you're really providing a lot of wear and tear with your belt loop, then it is a-okay to have your stitches go off the edge of the belt loop. Some people may have differing opinions on that, but it's just gonna really help anchor it, and so that you don't have a free edge, because if there's any edge of this belt loop exposed and you catch it on something, it's going to start peeling off. So not a lot, 1 or 2 stitches at most onto the fabric. And then you can go back down here and then you can stitch, you can leave that folded, but if you like I like the top stitching. So if you like that, you can also go in and stitch the bottom edge as well. This is an area that does get some pressure and wear and tear and some pull. So that additional row of stitching also just provides another layer of support. But we'll press this off and take a closer look. But that is a beautiful belt loop. You can apply yours the same way. You don't need a pattern to create a belt loop. So anytime you're sewing, just follow this video, make them the length and width that you want, and you can add belt loops just like this to any garment. How beautiful is that? What you'll see is that the pant is higher in the back and lower in the front. This is another reason you cannot simply just draw a straight line across the bottom of your pant, because chances are if it's cut at a different angle for how it's going to fit, it's going to hang differently on your body. So folding your pant in half as if you're going to press them, which would be the inseams, you're going to fold them and line them up. Then what you can do is line up the markings. So if you happen to have a different length from leg to leg, you can simply either grab the longer one and kind of cinch it up underneath, farther up towards the knee, and then you're going to line up these edges. All right, and this also is great if you have a pair of pants that you're altering and maybe you have one leg that's longer than the other in a ready-to-wear pants. That happens a lot. Okay, well, we're almost done. Now, what we're gonna do is, since we have these markings lined up, all right, the next thing is we want to determine the angle of our hem. Now, the more narrow a pant leg is, the more straight it needs to be. So I can't angle the hem drastically, because that's going to create a point at the center front. And this is where the break of the pant is that falls down the center front of the leg. Now, most of that really applies to men's pants, and the break of the pant is the pooling or how this hangs, especially near the ankle area. So some people really like a little bit of a break or a little bit of bagging or pooling of the fabric. That's a fashion thing, so just be aware of that. If you don't want any sort of break, or if you have a longer heel, then you want to angle a little more. So you can play around with that, but basically what you're going to do is you are going to line up your ruler and make sure this is a straight line. If you're doing a straight hem, like on a pair of jeans, it's going to be straight. And notice I have all these layers, and literally I'm just running a piece of chalk, or you can use your chalk runner. Then I'm going to fold up the first leg, and I'm putting pressure, so my thumb and my hand is pressing on the ruler so it's not moving. Now, see how I just slid that across there? And then I'm going to lift this up, and I'm now holding this down, and I'm going to press my chalk right against, I'm just pressing it right against the ruler. And now, if we look at what happens, see how there are beautifully even marked lines from top to bottom. The next thing that you can do is determine the width of your hem. So this first line is the finished edge. All right, so that's where the fabric is going to fold. Everything else is seam allowance. All right, so from here, we're going to determine how wide. And again, the more narrow your pant leg, you're probably going to want a little bit more average size hem. The more angled your hem is, the more narrow you want it to be. So there are a couple guidelines. If you have quite a drastic angle, then you want a little more narrow, probably under an inch. All right, but if it's really straight, you can do a wide hem too. But we're just gonna do a normal about 1 inch. And actually, if I just line up my ruler, do the same marking technique from either side, it's gonna put that line on there, and then I can cut that. My top leg, I actually have a little bit shorter, so because I've cut that off, but traditionally that would all be there. I can trim that off, and that will be where the hem is. So let's grab some scissors. We are gonna do a rolled hem on this pant, but you could certainly put hem facing or a hem tape on there, stitch that, you could serge that, and then at that point, all you would need to do would be fold that under once, and then you'd have a beautiful hem. But we're gonna take this to the machine, do a rolled hem on this, and you will have completed your Sasha trouser pant. Okay, well, we are ready to do a rolled hem on our pants. You'll see that we have our marked reference line here. And what I like to do is actually start at the inseam, and I will actually sew a continual circle from the inside. So you don't need to worry about the arm or anything on your pants. And this works really, really well, especially on a pant like this, where if you have a slim leg on there, that's not always gonna fit on the arm of your machine. So you can pin this and press it if you like to, but basically what I do is fold the pant leg up, and then that hem allowance I divide in half so that it's basically just tucked. Let's rephrase that. Let's say we're gonna basically do half of the seam allowance. We're gonna turn that under, and then we're gonna turn it under again. And you'll see that the fold or the line is on the edge of the fold. And again, if you need to pin that, you can do it, but otherwise I just kind of maneuver that under my machine. And then the great thing is you can line this up with the edge of your presser foot. You can line it up with one of the reference lines here, and you will get a beautiful even hem allowance. So let's go ahead and fold that in. And actually, a lot of times I will just put the fabric under my sewing machine, line up the marking line or that finished edge. Once I have that folded, then I just tuck under the seam allowance right here. And most fabrics, it just lays in there nice and beautifully. Now it is circular, so I'm gonna rotate. And as I rotate, you'll see that I'm gonna line up the fold right here, tuck that excess hem allowance under. And once you're kind of back around to the other side, it just naturally falls into place, which is really great. And hemming and a rolled hem is so basic. It's one of those, if you just really practice on some scrap fabric, to get to the point where you don't need to pin, and it's just quick, very, very quick. So let's take a look on the outside of the pant. I'll need to press it, of course, so it's a little wrinkly from folding it under there, but we have a beautiful, even rolled hem. It's professional. It looks exactly like it came from the factory. And then on the inside, again, I'll need to clip my thread, but you'll see that the stitches are nice and even with the fold. So turn your edge under. The finished reference line is the edge of the fabric, and you have a professional hem. Well, let's press this, and we are ready to wear our brand new Sasha pant. Thank you for joining me in this March episode of Nancy's Notions Wardrobe Builder. I hope you've enjoyed learning how to create pants and that you'll try these tips and techniques and you'll be well on your way to creating your own successful pants. Well, let's look at some of the successes that our team members have had. Our youth member, Eileen, has created these beautiful rosette sateen pants. Jaylyn has created these beautiful twill burgundy pants, and Audra has created the Flint, our alternate pattern, out of our beautiful wardrobe builder crepe in a just gorgeous olive color. I know everyone was really excited to have finished their own custom pair of pants. Well, I've decided I fell in love with our wardrobe builder blue twill, and I am wearing my twill Sasha pants as well. Well, join me next time because we're going to continue our journey in the April episode with more pants learning. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you are notified every time a new episode is available. Post in the comments below, be kind, be nice, ask questions, we'll answer them, and we will see you in our next episode of Nancy's Notions Wardrobe Builder.